Good afternoon once again to you, our lovely viewers. You're most welcome to another edition of the Youth Roundtable 2025. My name is Ivan Masawi and I'm privileged to be your host. Today, this afternoon, we dive into our digital rights, how emerging technologies have shaped our digital rights and governance, especially that today we are in a digital era. The fourth industrial revolution has taken shape. Joining me to the panel today, from my farthest left, is Saddam Hussein Abale. Saddam Hussein is a youth leader. Saddam Hussein, we are privileged to say, is now a very good member to the specific show. Saddam Hussein is a legal scholar. I always don't want to use a law student because he understands the law whenever we question him about the law. You're most welcome to the show.
Thank you, my brother. Good afternoon, our viewers, and to the fellow panelists.
You are most welcome.
Thank you, sir.
We are always privileged to have you on the Youth Roundtable.
Sure.
Next, as you move towards my right, is my sister, a very good friend, very vocal, Sarah. You're most welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure having me here. I'm glad. Thank you so much.
On my closest left, the man from the West Ibanda District, a youth leader, a student, but also someone who is very passionate about digital rights, freedoms, and governance. Timothy, Ainebyoona, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ivan. Once again, I'm Timothy Ainebyoona, and I'm very much privileged to be here with this substantive panel.
Yeah.
I look forward to an exciting.
We always appreciate you traveling long distances to join us.
Yeah.
Keep that spirit. We really need you around.
Yes. Thank you.
You will allow me start with you, Mr. Saddam. Maybe to our viewers, because this is a youth roundtable, specifically speaking to young people. What is your understanding of the word digital rights? Maybe for our friends who have done education, I know the law school has a general knowledge perspective of shaping the human race towards reasoning. So I think Sarah will share on the same, but
Sure.
What would be your take if we wanted to expand it to the topic that what are digital rights before we even look at how they are shaping?
Thank you so much, my brother. What are digital rights? I want to put it in the literal meaning of it. And then later on, we'll dive into the legal aspect of it. These are simply an extension, because digital is just a platform. These are simply an extension of the fundamental rights that we know that now portends or extends over to a platform which is now the digital platform. That means in itself that it is being allowed to exercise the normal freedom of expression that we're all aware about, that it is being allowed to have access to the internet and usage of it. It is also in itself embeds in the aspect of being allowed to access government services online and then be able to make a comment, give feedback or criticism of the same. So legally, if you look at the International Convention on Political and Civil Rights, specifically Article 19, sub-Article 2, it says the fundamental rights does not have a frontier. What does that mean? That in itself means that it is not only limited to us having an expression, maybe say on the streets, maybe say during engagements, but in itself it embeds the aspect of also having that freedom, having that right whenever you're using the internet in trying to express yourself, in trying to hold someone accountable, in trying to ensure that things move in the right way. So I think in brief, that's how I can put it.
Sarah, before we would want to have a gender definitive approach.
Gender definitive.
Yeah. What would be your take, picking from Saddam, that basically gives you that you can't call it digital and attach right, and then you take who establishes the right. But you, maybe to our viewers and me from Bududa, how would you explain to me what are digital rights?
Okay. For me, according to my perspective, digital rights is not just a single right, but rather a bundle of rights. We find that these rights are already there in the Constitution of Uganda, and we, as the technology has emerged, as we are using our phones, because 13 million Ugandans now can access WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, which has been banned in the country, and I wonder how they do it. But they can access those social media platforms using their phones. And almost the entire country, apart from people who are pastoralists and they can't, a few, they use small phones to communicate. And you find that digital, when you think of digital, you're not only thinking of the social media platforms of expression, you're thinking of a means of communication. So when you think of digital rights, you're thinking of the things we use our phones for. So considering we use our phones for a variety of things, you find that we ask Google, some of them ask Google about their health, their symptoms. You ask Google about how to do certain things, how to learn new things. Like many people have learned new business ventures using the internet. So you find that as Ugandans are trying to adjust the new technologies, they need to be protected in those ways, right? And how are they protected? In the Constitution, there is a right to privacy. And as you're using your phone, you're accessing doctors' information, you're talking to your doctors and stuff, you need to be protected. Your privacy has to be protected. That it is not only about information access and expressing yourself. It comes to protection of minorities. For example, children. Like now that we have children on board, children are now using phones, they are using YouTube. How are we going to protect them? That's why you're going to find things like PG. You're going to find, for example, if our child has a phone, now you can put an email address on their phone and say that now this is a child. And every site they access, you will receive a notification that they have accessed this, they have downloaded this, and you will limit, you protect them as they are having their, enjoying their freedom of expressing themselves and learning new things. Digital rights not only involve privacy and protection of minorities, but they also help in state transparency. You find that now the state, where there is a new suggestion, you find it on Twitter. For example, sometimes Wumeme, like that board, can post on his Twitter account that the areas, these and these areas are going to not have electricity. So you find that when we are doing such information, we are protected by the fundamental human rights provided for under the Constitution. That is how I understand digital rights.
My brother Timothy, you've listened to our colleagues in the law sector. They have really justified that the word right is protection, but is also a word granted to you maybe by the law, as we shall get it at another stage. I want to take your perspective before I take it to maybe some emerging technologies and how they may work to our best advantage. First of all, I want to pick your perspective on digital rights, but are you also enjoying the digital rights or not? Maybe you could share. I may be here when you're not enjoying digital rights. So, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the fact that I'm holding this phone, that exemplifies that I'm enjoying digital rights. Okay?
So you're in a digital era.
I'm in a digital era. So, in my opinion, for me, I think digital rights, to put it in more simple terms of any man can understand, They are just fundamental rights through which a person can access digital services. Take, for instance, we talk about internet, social media platforms, and like if we are here on this engagement, how best will someone access this engagement we are having here online without hindrances? And yes, of course, the word digital rights will go on to freedoms and how actually people's freedoms in regard to their digital access are interrupted, but still it calls on how people just come into access by themselves. Because we can't talk about the interruptions by other people, either by people who are heading it, but still some people themselves have failed to know their rights, even when they are not interrupted, that they do not exercise their digital rights because they do not know. So for me, in my opinion, I think these are just fundamental rights that someone can go through to access internet services.
To you, it is all about the internet. And the internet today has really dominated the meaning of the word digital. We have seen a rise in emerging technologies like the Internet of Things, quantum computing, machine learning, robotics, artificial intelligence. I want to come to you, Sarah. With all these emerging technologies, I know there should be policies to support their enforcement. At some point, I'll drive you to the National ICT Framework Policy 2003, and maybe we come to a lot of acts that are responsible for infrastructure. But picking a glue from you, as the human era in the 21st century, how important giving it to the viewer and how essential these digital platforms, these digital tools, important for personal development, but also seeing that they support growth of the human race to improving in whatever they do.
Okay. To answer your question, first of all, it is very important to live in a state where people can freely express themselves. Now, when it comes to emerging technologies, we see that we are living in an era where people are now getting education, people are getting educated. And unlike recently, where we had like two stations, TV stations, that was UBC, WBS, and I remember like NTV. And every time you had an interaction with a person from the state, they had a script. It was usually scripted. They had a speech ready for you, and people didn't know how to vet their leaders, right? But now in an era where people can now see their leaders and vet them on a personal basis, where we can talk and have an interface with our leaders, indeed there is need for creating policies. And in Uganda, very many policies have actually been made. I can take you to the Computer Misuse Act, which was it 2010? 2002, Computer Misuse Act. 2022.
Amended by
Amended.
Okay,
before the amendment of that act.
Before the amendment is 2012, 2013.
Yeah, 2012. Now, Computer Misuse Act was one of the policies that I can point to when we look at policies to manage, this digital kind of.
2011.
2011. Oh, nice. So in that Computer Misuse Act, before the amendment, there was a section 25, which stated that if you do anything, it didn't have any kind of scope. It covered every form of misuse, and they said that if you used your social media platform to abuse or do anything, you were taken and you were arrested. And they didn't provide the scope of what it really meant, the actual rules of you abusing or you misusing your computer to attack the state or anyone. So you find that very many people during that period were just arbitrarily arrested. you find that before these policies, because recently we have now the Data Policy Protection and Privacy Act, right? That protects your data, like as you're uploading your data to social media, as you're filling in information, should that information be linked? Before this act came in, you would find that you'll be on your WhatsApp, and then you see an ad, and you wonder how they got your information. You find that before, like for example, in the 2021 elections, you find that people could go ahead and even come to our inboxes, getting our information elsewhere to campaign. And that was a breach of the right to privacy. So you find that this, apart from these recent policies that we've made, the policies before were, should I say, all over the place. They were like, it showed, when you read those policies, you find that they are a reflection of fear from the state, simply because they put policies because they were afraid of how powerful digital awareness is and how powerful it is for people to come up and start using these platforms for whatever they were doing, right? That's why you find that the government had to manage and regulate how people use these things. You know, when you read history of governance, you find that the press was a very powerful tool of governance. How? That the information people were getting and the information people were receiving was modulated, was some kind of propaganda. Whereby you find that public opinion is very important. Like the moment the public is behind something, then they will push. That's why you find insecurities, people rioting, because public opinion is very important, right? Now, these policies are here to regulate what the public is getting. That's why you find people are being arrested for inciting violence in the public using social media. And you find some books have been banned that I've never read before. For example, Yellow Pupu. I don't know if you guys have read that book. You find that people used social media to publish things that were all over the place. So the government had to come in and regulate and provide policies. You find that these policies have actually helped. On paper, they are actually very good policies. If you go on and read these acts, you find that these laws are very good in data regulation. They are very good in upholding these rights, freedom of expression. You find that when they come in and tell you that you can express yourself, but don't use vulgar language, it is good. But is it really, implemented? How is it being implemented, right? So that is all I can say about the policies on data protection and privacy, digital rights.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Coming to you, Saddam, before I'll come to pick Timothy's perspective on how digital rights have really shaped the landscape in education. I'll come to pick from you, since it is a global emerging technology, that we live in an era of the fourth industrial revolution. Basically, civic engagement is one of the issues, or one of, how can I call it, has had a lot of disentanglement with the interpretation of civic engagement. There have been a lot of abnegations when it comes to civic engagement. Basically, if I'm to cite Article 29 of the 1995 Constitution of Uganda, is very clear about freedoms of speech. The African Charter of Human Rights, these are all international treaties or conventions where Uganda is a treaty. You did state the International Convention of People and Civil Rights. UN still has a charter. Uganda is in agreement of all these conventions. But now coming, I think, to the real business about it. Where do we think as a country, as young people, as youth, we need to get, to borrow the, I need to call it the distinctive line, but do we need to carry both our civic responsibility as citizens, enjoy our civic rights in harmony with the enjoyment of our digital rights?
Thank you, my brother. That is a very, very good question.
It has never been a bad thing.
Now, to start with, I think the importance of social media or the usage of internet cannot be underrated. It is something that we all uphold, that has helped a bigger number of the population. Even in Uganda, let's not look at any other jurisdiction. Uganda alone, there are so many of the youth that do business online, be it on Facebook, be it on Twitter and others. So it has done a tremendous job in trying to bring services closer to the people and also offer them opportunities. Now, you made mention of Article 29. You see, Article 29 is very clear, as you said, freedom of expression and assemblies and all that. But you see, that in itself is limited. You see, Article 44 of our Constitution limits. It says, you see, while enjoying your rights, you should not in any way infringe on my rights. And that applies to the usage of digital rights as well. As you're expressing your views on Twitter, Facebook, or any other platform, you should be mindful of my rights as well.
You bring me to the Computer Misuse Act 2022.
Before I go to that, still within our own constitution, it tells us, you see, all those rights provided in our constitution, they are not absolute. It reaches a stage where there's a cap. The constitution itself puts a cap on it, that you are limited. You cannot just want to abuse other people's rights as you're enjoying your rights. So for starters, to the youth outside there, you see, you're protected. You have the statutory provision to express yourself, to use the digital rights, but be mindful that as you use the digital rights, you shouldn't be in a position to step on other people's rights. Now, if I can make reference to Article 26A of the amendment of the Computer Misuse Act, you know, it introduces the hate speech. And then Article 26D of the amendment Section 26D of the amendment introduces misuse of our computers. How do you misuse your computer? A computer can be a phone. So now, the law gives us the breakdown of how you can misuse it. You see, if you make a statement that demeans a person, as to the literal interpretation of how demeaning is it is a question of another day. But from an old man's understanding, the reasonable person, the test of a reasonable man, if you use a statement like, say, Northerners are stupid, without prejudice to the Northerners, but I'm just using this as an example. Yeah? Now, you see, you're trying to incite a given sect. You're trying to take a sectarian approach by saying these categories of people are stupid. So Section 26D says you're misusing your computer by trying to instigate or by trying to incite a given section of the population. Because as the person writing it, you may not know the value, or you may not know the impact or the effect of what your statement is going to cause. Any person can pick it up, and then by the time you know it, fight has erupted somewhere. People are abusing each other. It goes on and on and on. So the law is very clear in trying to tell us what we ought to do, but also, yeah, as we are using this, you're not limited on how you can use it, but you should be mindful. Much as you want to enjoy your rights of using that digital platform, you must also know that I also have my rights that I have to enjoy while using the digital rights. My brother Masawi, I want to bring to your attention and our viewers outside there that you see, because of the so much hate speech that is online, the level of mental health or the level of mental suffering that people go through is unbelievable. Just because someone may not have a recourse, someone may not have now, what remedy do I have after this, after being abused, after being bullied? So you realize that a number of youth are suffering over such hate speech and such cyberbullying, which has to, it's an appeal to the youth which we have to put a stop on by ourselves, not even inviting the long arm of the law to come in. You get the point? So it is really important as we exercise these rights as we enjoy our freedoms, we must be very mindful of the languages we use, of the expressions we put out there, because in any way it will have an effect, an inclination on another person who may pick it in another different way. Just like how you run a home. You see, in running a home, there are do's and don'ts in a home. Yeah, you just don't, as a child, just don't go on doing things that your heart wants. That in itself will lead you somewhere, either to be punished, either to have other ramifications. So it is important that as we handle the digital platform, and I'm glad that the government has allowed a bigger portion of the population to allow it. As she rightly said, we have about 13.3% of the population that are using digital platforms. That is as of 2024. It is a report of Datare. That is a report of 2024. 13.3%. Now, as a developing country, we don't expect the numbers to shoot overnight. No. If you remember very well, the Access to Information Act was passed in 2005, just of recent. So you ask yourself, between when we got independence to 2005, how were issues of access to information being handled? So
Post office was. We are old enough. We was messed up.
So I think this is a good step in the right direction for us. Of course, in itself, we cannot negate the fact that there are weaknesses, both on the side of the users and on the side of the implementers of the law, which in itself is the government, and the intermediaries as well.
Wow, thank you very much, Sadat. Before I come back to Timothy, Sarah, kindly understand me on this. I think as we speak digital rights, the issue of digital tools, which are used as infrastructures, platforms, I don't know. I want to assess their threats. Most people assess their threats on only the limitations to governance. Now there are limitations to mental health. But little we also give credit to their promotions. I know as a young man who was to the FDC party, I know people like Kakwenza have found very good life abroad after running away from persecution of their digital rights. Our mama Stella Nyanzi has tested the waters. She attracted a very good legal case for you legal scholars. I think the case that brought Isaac Semakade to light. I want you to give your assessment first from a gender perspective, but also from the big ladies perspective of the threats and opportunities that these digital tools present. Before I come to him to also give me a similar approach, how best do they leverage education and how best do they leverage as the common man?
That's a very interesting question. Now, first of all, being digital.
Threats and opportunities.
Yeah, threats and opportunities. I would first take us back to a recent scenario of the Bank of Uganda. Money that was taken
Cyber
online and stuff.
Yeah.
So before that scenario happened with the Bank of Uganda where money was laundered, I would take us to the...
So the threat is digital security and safety is also a key issue.
Exactly. Now, the thing is like this. Now, in Uganda, we have what they call forwarding, where every call you make is actually listened
by MTN.
and everyone can know where you made the call, what time, how long what the call was, and everything. And that thing was actually managed by is it an AI or software called Pegasus, right? But it is quite interesting that it is the same software that brought in that call tracking and everything. That is the same software that is allegedly said to have been used in robbing money from the Bank of Uganda. Very interesting thing. So you find that now that people, because the internet is a very dangerous place, people can access
I always
hackers.
thought it is very good. You're calling it dangerous. Oh?
Yeah, it is a dangerous place because you can be hacked. We find that we have now learned on a national level that even our Bank of Uganda can be hacked. Now, not only that issue of hacking the Bank of Uganda, we find that there is what they call mass surveillance. which is an infringement on people's rights. But mass surveillance, the government has implemented CCTV cameras all over every junction that enters the city, different, traffic lights where you find that there are CCTV cameras. And all those cameras have been provided by a company in Hawaii, according to a report by Unwanted Witness. Now, you find that no one can help you out of their goodness of the heart. Like, that thing doesn't exist. Even when someone is helping you, even if they're getting money, especially if it's countries within countries, the country would consider what they are gaining out of it. And we learned our lesson. I am quite sure we learned our lesson with the Bank of Uganda saga that happened. But you find that the government is still using such kind of software to monitor people, to see where their movements and stuff. And I think that it is a threat for people to be monitored. Because if someone can access your data online, if someone can see everything you access, then they know that this person seems that like they have a heart problem. I touch here, and you're dead, So it does not only affect your data, but it also affects your health. You find that it is linked to every aspect of your life. It is linked to your money. You find that now there is mobile banking. People just access their banks with a swipe of the hand, and people are learning how to hack these accounts. People are learning how to handle, because the moment there is a thing that the moment your phone is stolen, if you had a bank app on the phone, you have to call the bank immediately and tell them my phone has been stolen. And you find that that is a threat that has been brought in by digital awareness. Now, opportunities, oh my God, there are so many opportunities. You find that I actually learned how to make pizza using YouTube.
Wow.
You can learn anything on the internet. You can learn so much, like regardless of the fact that you're educated, whether you have a degree or not, like the strategies are there. You find that you learn things from people who are experienced. People go there, some of them go there to just make content, but some of them are actually educating. You find that regardless of the fact that you didn't get the education in the school, you're going to find it on the internet, and that's a very great opportunity. Not only that, now you don't need contractors, you don't need brokers. For example, in international trade, you want to participate in international trade, do your research, check the reviews of that person.
Online bidding.
Exactly. And then you find that it is a very...
Even orders.
And you don't only find yourself participating in business in Uganda, you find yourself doing things in America, things like that on your phone, just at the swipe of your phone. Last time I was talking to an old man, and he told me this generation just doesn't know the opportunity it has in their phone. And he was saying that if these opportunities were there in our days, me inclusive, we would be so far,
Timothy, your friend would be so far. Where would you be? I want to pick it from you. Have you enjoyed the digital tools? Have you enjoyed ChatGPT? Have you enjoyed the one XBet? What opportunities have they presented for the education as a person who's still a student? But also, what threats have things like online dating caused? Have they caused diseases and other deaths? Yeah, we may be here in digital rights are causing other deaths, so we can really, as a person, when you move to most European countries, I think even Asia, they have fought so hard that they innovate local tools or platforms, that most of the platforms that are dominant in most of these countries are organically made in those countries. When you go to the Chinese, they have their WeChat is China oriented, so that the policies, the regulations is internally feasible to within the laws of the state, which I think is not the case here in Uganda. As we were in COVID, students experienced the ordeal, online distance education learning, have, taking your perspective from the COVID era to now, where do you think to the education system that have been, but also you as also a voter, do you see even in the, as my big brother posed about enjoyment of civic rights, do you see that we have made any strides which may be in a positive direction to meet within the global perspective?
Okay, thank you very much. So this question you have posed to me is a question that can have a two-way approach.
First of all, two ways to take.
First of all, digitalization or civic internet is at the very heart of development. But then, something that is very comic is that this digitalization, even when it is coming, it falls within the contemporaries. And when I talk of the contemporaries, I mean the social aspect, I mean the political aspect, and the economic aspect. Okay? And then, before I go to that part, allow me talk about something to do with the principles of digital space. One of the principles of digital space is free access. And if I can think about some other one, it is protected civic space and some freedoms of expression. But then the question here to ask is, which people are subject to freedoms? Okay? Because within the contemporaries, like I said, some people seem not to be subjected to the freedoms. There are laws, there are policies that tend to govern the civic internet or the civic space, but some people act otherwise and they are not even touched. But for me, if I want to say something on my phone here, sometimes I feel threatened. If I say it, how will it be? But not dwelling too much on that part, I want to say that, like I said, that digitalization is at the very heart of development. There are very many things that students or the education sector has gained because of digitalization. Like we talked about the COVID-19, very many people were at home, but they continued studying. I personally pursuing a course in the Western, but still I'm pursuing some other course here in Central when I don't come here. So you can see that
multitasking. You're a wise man. Continue.
You can see that digitalization has actually had a great impact. But then some of the hindrances that we are facing are, take for instance, what is the cost of internet? What is the cost of internet?
I think you now start the debate officially.
Okay? Because, and then people who set in the cost of internet, what are their intentions and interests? Because I remember I was somewhat young, even when I'm still young, but by then I was still very young, when the OTT tax was brought into place.
2021.
Don't make it.
Yes. I was so some of the reasons that brought in that OTT tax were personal reasons, that people on internet are attacking someone, and therefore we organized to bring in the OTT tax to restrict people from too much attacking, that even when they attack, a fewer number of people who can afford are the ones to attack, but still they will be restricted somewhere, somewhat. But what is it that we as students in the education sector have to do with this civic internet? The benefits, like my sister here talked about learning how to make pizza. How are we relating with the civic internet? Because for me, in many times when I make my submissions, I do not want always to extend what I call a blame to some of the sides. I always want to blame our sides. How do we tend to relate with the civic internet? When I have this phone of mine, before going to the policies that are there that restrict me to some of the things, before going to the economy aspect, that I might not be having data, if at all I have, how do I tend to relate with my phone, to enjoy my phone? Because
without data.
I said when I have data, how do I tend to relate with my phone? Because I can say that we young people, in most cases, tend to use these phones for non-beneficial aspects. And when we are asked, we tend to tell people that these digital machines or digitalization is not impacting very much. But I can really tell you
I
that...
think, let's go for a break. You'll come back to address me the issue of innovation, creativity, in line with use of these digital tools while expressing your rights. Thank you very much. We shall return after a short break. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back, our viewers, from that break. Timothy, we were with you. We wanted to really assess how the digital tools have really nurtured but also promoted the issue of innovation, creativity. What else apart from the two? Okay, there are still rights and freedoms. You could take it from there.
Okay, welcome back, our viewers. So basically, the question I ended posing is the question I want to pose as I start. What should we use the digital internet for as the youth? Because this digital internet has a lot of very many good things. But when we go to these internets, when we use our phones, sometimes we find us learning dancing strokes. Like he said, we will find us going
fitness.
You call it fitness,
yes,
but it is also something. You will find us going to the online dating sites, and of which I think they are very...
That is an opportunity to
No.
save transport.
There are very many opportunities within. So what is my suggestion or my intervention? My intervention is that before we blame anyone, we should also embark on the serious business of trying to use the civic internet or to engage with digitalization in a way that will be very much beneficial to us. Because now someone who can make pizza and compare it with CJ's from internet, you can see that is something that someone took up, okay? And it is quite interesting. And there are very many things. So leaving that aspect, how has the internet been of purpose to the general public? Look at the business community. Look at how they are advertising their businesses. I'm in the Western, but I know what is taking place here in Kampala. I know businesses. If I want very many good textbooks, I know where to buy them. If, like, the advertisement, how it goes on civic internet. But then we come to the restrictions we get. In using civic internet, how do we get restricted? We find very many aspects, some of which are state aspects, government aspects, but other aspects are aspects that align with ourselves. Take, for instance, when we are here like on this civic engagement, how do we relate with the contemporaries? To what extent do we talk to express ourselves to the fullest? Do we have relate within us that what we are talking about is likely not to be absorbed by the public? And when I talk of public here, I want to specify, and in more deliberate terms, the public that is actually in service. Will we relate with them? Or they will not just, they will leave us to exercise our rights, but we will not have relevance. Because these engagements have been there. And it is something that hurts to always come like here. We talk about very many aspects, we address them, but they make no relevance. How is the public absorbing what the civic internet is trying to put in place? And if they do not absorb it, then how best can we go with that? That is why I brought the issue of the contemporaries. There are very many aspects disregarding the policies that are in the constitution that are documented down. There are very many aspects that are actually not seen by everyone. Like the way we use civic internet now, I can say it is just deceptive.
Wow. Not our show is not deceptive. It is real.
The way we use
are flowing. Our viewers, let's keep tuned. Coming to you, Sarah. There is the issue of the digital civic landscape in Uganda in relation to governance and the political nature. At some point, we did take that approach with my brother. But you see, even the academic scholars around Makerere have really put it on writing about how this digital landscape has since modified the DNA of how we now do our politics, our governance. And the greatest friction has been as a result of how governance has related with the digital right, the digital civic enjoyment of rights. I can take you, while I was still a student, I took part in the protests of Free Bobi Wine in 2018. I took part in the protests in Kampala about the introduction of OTT taxes. And when you look, really, these tools by that were even underrated. Today, even the president goes on his X and leaves a very long message. He goes there to show how he's supervising the PDM model. Yeah, but since he's a friend to my friend Hussein, he also has a son who, when after taking a cup of tea, will go there and make the digital tools a mess. So we want to come to that question. The civic landscape, first from the policy view, because I would want him to take much of the policy view. But where do you think in policy as a country we are disconnected from the implementation? We have seen it, laws being applied selectively. We have seen government fail to promote its programs because of failing to really see the opportunity to organize young people and see that they are beneficiaries of these digital sites. Government has again tried to run away, see that things like PDM, which are more manual, they have taken a manual approach, and we see the results when you monitor and evaluate are not as superfluous as they would be maybe if you had some digital component. From a policy view, where do you think as a country we are really struggling to find a balance in the politics, in the policy, in the governance, with the existing very many laws that are a duplication? Because if you read the Cyber Act, you read Computer Misuse Act, you read the UCC Act itself, you read the National ICT Policy Framework of 2003, you even read, you go to dockets of ministries, you find there's a lot of duplication, but still we are not achieving the impact that we desire to achieve in line with organizing both the digital civic landscape of the governance, but also the rights.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, I want to refer us to a very interesting scenario that happened recently.
I love those ones.
But when Obama joined Twitter, he was actually the first president to join Twitter. By then it was Twitter, not X. Many world leaders came up and started joining Twitter. So you find that now state transparency is simpler. You know, social media provides a microphone for those people who don't have it.
I think one addition is that X gave Trump an advantage.
Exactly. Yes, it did. Because, yes, I have remembered it did. Because you find that I was support of Kamala Harris. Yeah, but most of the tweets were mainly basically Trump and more of propaganda. But not only that, you find that the state can now, people can question the state on issues.
So transparency is a big.
It's a peak of digitalization of things. You find that now we no longer have to assess our leaders, because you find that many people were saying that Muhoozi is the next president. But when you go on Twitter and you assess him as a leader and his views on governance, you may find him either lacking or competent. I don't know if you get it. So you find that these social media platforms are giving
the report card.
Exactly. Like, for example, we had to wait for things to be gazetted in the Uganda Gazette, which is also expensive. Yeah, exactly. To be, when it was expensive, for example, they would make a bill and gazette it, and a few people could access it. But now they make a bill, gazette it, and then someone just buys it, and everyone can easily see the provisions of that bill. So you find that it is a very great tool. And when it comes to governance, before social media, there was the press. And like I mentioned earlier, the press is a tool of governance, just like religion is a tool of governance, right? So how does the press come in? The press is what helps public opinion. It is what gives the public what to think and what to support. Because you find that someone may be just deep down there in the village and they don't see what is happening in the city. For example, when you find this thing of Kawempe voting, there was a video that circulated around of people breaking boxes and stuff. People wouldn't have known that hadn't there been phones to record such incidences happening. Now people are now accountable. You no longer hide things in the dark. And that is the first step to having good governance in a country. You find that even part of the objectives in the constitution provide for their state to provide information to the people, and the people to also participate in nation building activities. You find that being done on Twitter, much as, or on X, I still call it Twitter, but it's X. You find that much as some people may not know how to express themselves, may express themselves using some
I think we
language.
skipped discussing the digital literacy itself, but we can proceed.
Yeah. Thank you. So they express themselves using some language, but there is something I learned growing up, that when someone is shouting at you, don't find offense in the bad things they are saying. Find the reason why they are screaming. Because if 1-2 people are saying you have a problem, then if it's 1 and 2, you may say they are haters, but it's more than 1 and 2.
That is true. You have a problem.
There is a problem, and regardless of how, because, we are living in an angry world where people are no longer silent. Much as there is this kind of persecution that is there, find that our Law Society president,
yes, you now have good examples. Proceed.
He they call it tweeting? Anyway, he tweeted something on his X, and it is now causing him problems and serious problems. But what I'm trying to say, that it is now a microphone. People can really speak their opinion, speak their views, support things, be in support of some things. And find that when the the country is also making policies. For example, when they were making that Sexual Offences Act, where they were saying that anything you do, looking at a woman weirdly, very many crazy, that bill that was being made in, was it 20? The Sexual Offences Bill.
It's still a bill.
Yeah, it's still a bill, but people went on social media and they argued it that now it is no longer discussed, it's no longer there for the second and third reading. Now people can participate in their governance. The government of Uganda.
They are promoted inclusiveness, if I'm to pick it.
Thank you. That now we are sending representatives in the country, but you find that these representatives now know the voices of the people. You find that when they were putting this age limit things, many members of parliament came up and said, my people have refused. And how did they get the views of their people? They were using social media. You find that it is such a very great tool of governance that even the government had to shut down Facebook. Though some people claim to still use it, but as a law-abiding citizen, ever since they shut it down. Anyway,
God is seeing you.
let us continue.
God will reward.
But still, you find that now that people can participate in their governance, this is a government for a reason. It's not a monarchy. And it not being a monarchy, you have one supreme leader and what they say goes. But now people are being governed in a way they wish to be governed. They are saying no to OTT and OTT has to go simply because people are saying no to it. And that is the way it is supposed to go. So I think to uphold the rule of law, digital platforms and phones are really doing a very great job. And therefore, the policies government is making, at first they were usually, those policies were mistreating people, like they weren't clear. But now the people have come up, organizations have come up and they are trying to guide the government that this will uphold the right, this will uphold the right. You're not the head, but you are guide. I know if you get that. You find that now that the press releases, at first we had fax, people who existed in a generation of fax. I know you guys don't know how to use a fax machine, but we had fax where it was a
I don't know where you assume that you don't.
We had fax where you would send a fax to go to places, but now that used to be a very long process, and some people didn't have those fax machines.
Lining up at the post office or at the phone booth was fun.
Not only that,
Okay,
but
proceed.
you find that the post will take years and weeks before putting in that information.
I think there was even need for no hurry.
No urgency.
But now you text someone, you send something, and you really involved the entire nation. So that's why these opportunities are very good, and the government is also involved. You find that even the state use those platforms in informing the people of what is happening really. Find that some things that, for example, recently when we were watching that case on NBS, other people were watching it on their phones. You find that there is so much transparency and it is so good for governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Coming to you, my brother, we are discussing integration, embedding of these civic or digital tools with their rights accompanied towards the issue of governance. How best would it make governance more effective? We have seen that in the previous election, we have lost civil society organizations like the DG because they were advocating for more transparent policies and strong local structure. Today, Center for Constitutional Governance with some of its partners like Oxfam International are still pushing to see that the issue of digital sovereignty and data sovereignty is a key issue, because not only does it empower the citizens, but also increases the efficiency of leadership and the efficiency of service delivery. What is your take?
Well, you know, data sovereignty is a very key aspect as well. That I agree. Also allow me just to allude on the fact of how important social media has been, which in itself relates to the aspect of the data sovereignty that we're talking about. You see, a bigger number of the head of states around the world nowadays use social media to communicate
Donald Trump.
their official positions or the official communication, be it Donald Trump, our president here, and our different heads of department, even including ministries and other local governments, that it has formed a very integral part of the day-to-day communication and how information reaches to the person down there. Now, coming to the aspect of data sovereignty, you see, it is very important. But I also want to believe that the powers that be are not just deliberately refusing it to take a center stage. But you see, as that comes in play, there are other invisible hands that have to be observed. That you see, you don't just allow it to come in blindly. There are safety nets that have to be put in place. Remember, most of these platforms are not developed by us. It is just a copy and paste that we bring here. Yeah, which actually itself requires we adapt. We just go adapt to bring here, which actually requires that we have legal frameworks in place that govern them, that stipulate how they are going to be used. No wonder that's why we, in 2018-19, when the OTT tax came in, of course there was a lot of outcry and all that. But because you see, we didn't, being a developing country, at times we are on a haste to just go and copy and paste and bring here. We don't get to understand the nitty-gritties. How do we govern this? How do we handle this? But you'll also understand that because of the rapid growth, Masawi, I can tell you the number of innovators that come on board every day is enormous. We may not have it here in Uganda, but if you look at the developed countries, it's enormous. The countries like China, countries like Russia have their own app developed that only work within their jurisdiction.
No, even here in Uganda, we have developed some.
Yeah, I am glad we're now advancing to that level. But you see, we are still not to that stage. Now, that brings in the aspect of the sovereignty we're talking about. Because of the rapid growth,
which is compulsory,
which is okay,
non-negotiable.
But then you realize the stakeholders, like state government, may lack the capacity of how to regulate these people who come on board. But they can also not do without the regulations that come on board. That's why players like Center for Constitutional Governance, the Oxfam, have to understand that, you see, it is work in progress. It is not something that will just happen in a day and everything.
Even our digital literate levels
are very low. Additionally, look at the cost of internet. Accessing internet is very low. Go to our rural areas.
You still have the Wachweza around.
Not very many can afford to even buy data for a day. And remember, this data you buy even expires, to make it even worse. That I buy my data of 1,000, which is 300 MBs, which expires after 24 hours, which does not make a lot of sense. So you see, in a way, it now impedes the successes that have been made already, both from the state actors and non-state actors. And then it becomes very expensive for the developers, because now you're developing your app that has
consumption is low because of usage.
Low.
Yeah, I think you also dive to the economic bit after your submission.
Surely. So it loses the economic sense that me as a developer, because of the cost which is beyond my control that I can't control, but I already have my app I've developed, people cannot be able to use it. You see, the absorption of it is a challenge. And you don't have a fund which could be like a revolving fund where I can go to seek help. They help me. I do a lot of marketing.
Actually, Uganda has one of the most expensive internet
in the region.
I avoided those statistics for the show, but now you've brought me there. Let's proceed.
In the region and world over, it is very expensive. That now presents a very huge bottleneck for both the users and developers. And I think it is high time our government takes initiative into this. I know the ICT policy is elaborate in that regard, but it still lacks the element of how we can support the innovators and in itself find a way of how we can reduce. UCC is a regulator that should also take up some of these things.
It
in
has
terms
been
of-
ranked as a key violator of digital rights.
Well, I can't allude to that fact, but it is a regulator, but it also in itself has to do an advisory role of trying to advise government, because you see they are hands-on. They understand what goes in on a daily basis. They know how many innovators come on board every other year and how many don't even celebrate their first anniversaries as businesses. So you see, it is a very big issue that all stakeholders, both state and non-state actors, have to take a lot of interest in trying to ensure that we fully digitalize, because there is no economy that will thrive without it being digital. That will be a very big lie. So as we are seeing the rate now, it seems to be pleasing, but I am very confident that if we invest we put in a lot of investment in the next 5 to 10 years, this economy can be a boost via digital platforms.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saddam. You really opened my reasoning on the topic from a lot of perspectives. Coming to you, Timothy, it is not that we are still discussing the opportunities, but there has been a debate of threat that some of these digital tools cause to employment, that we needed robots in parliaments, and the future Masawis are sent back to do that, so that robots which are more efficient in policy legislation can do the business. There has been a debate of substitution between the human race and some of these emerging technologies, especially machine learning and robotics. Today, when you're programming, most of the programs leave the JavaScript and C++. Most of the advanced programs really can add, you can really program human nature. With this debate going forward, as a young person, do you see these tools, how have they worked for young people in terms of innovation, job creation specifically, but also seeing that the young people like you down in Ibanda, first of all, maybe you've been on radios, how have they shaped how you're seeing the politics, you're seeing employment, you're seeing the economics?
Okay, well, like I had said earlier, that the aspect upon which that digitalization is being handled in Uganda, it is a state of deceptive calm. And when I say that, you try to say that ours is flowing, and indeed it is flowing. But deceptive calm here is suggested to mean a state of tranquility, a state of peacefulness, but with underlying tension, pressure, and turmoil. So like my friend suggested here, that suggested the point of inclusivity and transparency, that the people are actually given chance to assess the government, to make evaluations, and he hinted on some.
The result of what they have assessed,
He hinted.
Bring kiboko.
He hinted on the examples, like if there is the bill in parliament and the people come say that my people have not accepted, does the bill go on? It goes on. If the people come on social media, on here we come on engagements, we talk about the best, they want to stop it from there. How does it end? When we come here, we talk about.
So for you, evaluating the impact, relevance.
Yes, I'm trying to merge the aspect of inclusivity and transparency with what is actually the contemporary setting. Because when we come here, we look at what JAT is doing has been doing in Kawempe, we talk about it, how does it end? I want to say that in the current state of Uganda, disregarding all the policies we have, disregarding all the freedoms we have, there is what we call something to do with executive pushback. And when we talk about executive pushback, it can bring a lot of meaning regarding the aspect upon which you brought it to be. So when we try to do all this, and they are not given precedence, they are not given their pride of place, they are not valued.
We do them for decoration.
Yes, we do them for decoration. and we see that we are doing something, how has it been effective? When people speak, yes, we are speaking. We go on Twitter, we see the first son making comments that are actually hitting everyone. If they go and evaluate that person and assess that person, what is the effectiveness of the evaluation? Is it really there? The answer is, it is not there. That is why I suggest that there is underlying turmoil and tension and pressure, because some people will actually be even captured, but we leave it at that.
No, they are arrested. These are court cases. We have people who have been arrested for using their right.
Anyway, leaving that one, for me, I don't believe in the inclusivity brought about by the digitalization.
I think it is a case per case audit. Yeah, scenario by scenario. You cannot generalize. We agree that from the political perspective, we are standing where you're standing. And we organize the work against corruption. It was strong on media, but when you come to the reality, the virtues are everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, you can proceed.
Okay. Now, going to your question, to this last question of the issue of robotics and all those innovations that are actually brought in place to substitute people. For me, in my opinion, I think that is one of the disadvantages of digitalization to do with human beings, because
Substitution. You don't want me to bring a robot as panelist.
Now,
Robots are supposed to simplify your life. Make your life.
Okay. You have a robot host here.
For instance,
I go home.
For instance, let me just create a scenario. Just recently, we are doing something at our university, and I come to realize that even in most simplest terms, people are not going to think. And I was compelled and conditioned to tell someone that, you know, we were just cracking a joke. She was a guy, and I was like, today when I'm doing this, I will want you, but when I'm going to marry, I will not marry you, because you cannot even tell me that you don't want to think over this simple aspect because of AI. So I think the way we use some of these things is actually
redundancy. It has made people
yes,
lazy.
yes. I can give you a very good another scenario. I myself was tasked with something to select questions to interview someone and a big person. And I go to AI I command it to bring questions. But when I read in the questions, I look at these questions and say, but really, can these questions interview someone? And I desert from the questions. I now use my head. Because I looked at the question and AI sets a question and you feel like it is killing someone. So what am I suggesting? I'm suggesting that in as much as we are using these innovations, of course they are good. We cannot distance ourselves from that fact. They are aiding our work, because take for instance, like these have been lawyers. Some time back, I had some good lecturer of law telling students that someone can read a case of 300 pages within like 1 hour, and then for you who want to do it manually, that you can that you can read it within 5 days. And I looked at it as being relevant. But then I suggest that in as much as we are using these things, still we should not remove ourselves from it. We should also put our mind to task. Now, when you say that we bring robots in parliament to be the ones that have to represent people.
They are not corrupt.
They are not corrupt.
Okay.
But how will a robot represent me in Ududa from Ududa? How will a robot come and assess what are actually the problems bedeviling our place in Ibanda and then present those problems in parliament?
Program it. These are programs.
But all in all, digitalization has to be used. But for me, I suggest that either the government should come and put the way how it should be used. Put the way where it will stop and how it will end, and when people have to stop and have to engage in these things, and where people have to stop. Because still, even we know they are good, but still we have our active intervention as human beings. And trust me, these AIs are innovated by people. And I can say that disregarding, they are doing things at a terrific speed, but given time to think, we can do things intelligently. So, yeah, I know they can do things at a terrific
I'll go
speed.
back to his suggestion that we are adaptive, we are consumers. So whenever you are a consumer of any product, you really look
Face the
whether
consequences.
why was your brain not considered in the process of innovation? That is just a law of consumption. You always feel disadvantaged. Coming to you as we conclude, as we move closer towards coming to the end of the show, maybe Sarah, our panel today agrees that digital literacy is very central to realizing our full potential of global connectivity. You'll discover that even the misinterpretation of the digital rights and governance itself, which is our topic today, is as a level of our core investment into the digital literacy itself, which today is essential, non-negotiable. As you close in your statements, where do you think governments should really put to investment but also goodwill? You've had Timothy clearly state that we do a lot of things online, but in reality they are a fallacy. We find Masawi very active on Twitter, but come in reality is entering Bukowo day and night.
That reminds me of the time people were going to strike. People were ready, tomorrow we are striking. Now that morning it rained and no one went on the streets because it was raining. We love this.
Yeah, it doesn't rain online. So how will you it doesn't rain online. Online is ever shining, even at night.
But otherwise, I feel like digital rights are human rights. And there is still a gap between merging what is happening online and merging what is happening in reality. Now, as people are expressing themselves using their rights, the government has come in, I don't know if it's out of fear, that now people don't access Facebook.
I want you to give it knowledge. What would be your advice to government? We are closing, so I just want that statement. I know it fears, though that we have known it. This government fears a lot, that we can't deny.
Yeah.
They fear the digital platforms. But what would be your advice to government on future investment to see that the literacy levels of use of these platforms both become more ethical, become more useful to promoting us as a young population, a country with a young population? The question will be general in terms of our innovation, creativity, access to great opportunities, but also linking us to the global connectivity. Yeah.
So my advice to government is to do its role, because when you look in the law and the duties of the government, they are very beautiful. It should just implement those and implement those in the digital era. Like it should listen to its people and reduce on the costs of speaking up, the costs of putting up their views on online. It should create more ventures for business, opportunities online. Should tell people, or especially the youth, on how to get involved in the society and all that. And I don't want to be those people who always go and run government yet, but in this regard, in regard to digital rights, we cannot do anything unless they are not going to be law-abiding citizens, without the government reducing on those policies, the harsh policies it has put. You find that in this day and era, there are some things that cannot happen, which are very important for good governance. So the government should reduce on their policies that have been put, the directives put by the state, whereby we have spent years without using some social media apps which were equally important. So the people cannot do anything without the government putting and coming closer to the people and merging, because it's a government and still not a monarchy. You're governing us in a way we wish to be governed. And we need the government on board with realizing people's digital rights.
Coming to you, Saddam, sorry. If I can read the budget projections of Ministry of ICT in the last budget, I'm trying to pick, but it was not really a big budget. I don't think it was 143, I think, billion shillings. It was not deducted by 95. I can't recall the actual figures, but I found it a very low investment in the sector, given it is an interlink of very many. It can really, if well invested into upscale trade, upscale agriculture, upscale security by now using of cameras, and upscale our education, upscale our health diagnosis, upscale our transport systems, because with the jam, when you have AI tools, you can predict which road is most likely to have jam. And where do you think government is not learning in your closing statements? And where do you want to advise your friend General Museveni and his team to go and read today evening?
Thank you, my brother. I think I will start with the advice bit, that whereas I take cognizance of the tremendous strides government has made in terms of investment in the ICT sector, but however, there still needs to be a lot, there still demands a lot that needs to be done. One is that we need to have a substantial investment in the sector. By this, I mean in terms of infrastructure, in terms of connectivity. I would be glad to know that someone from Yumbe, that is the northwestern part of this country, and someone from Kanungu down, the southwestern part,
Well represented in Northern,
can have access, can have enough access, and it is affordable.
Yeah, in Ududa, I go to the hill on top, I'm on like then come back down.
That's what we're talking about. You don't need to even go to the hill. Connectivity has to be accessed anywhere, at any time. So that now requires that substantial investment in it. Then we need to increase the penetration levels of the usage, which in itself now has the literacy levels. How can people be educated on how to use
They get
media?
more return on usage.
Exactly. Now, this in itself now needs government to engage the intermediaries, the service providers like the MTNs, the Airtel, and others, so many on the market. Because the number, I can't recall now, there are so many service providers on the market now, which are private-led, by the way. Then, additionally, that government needs to deliberately study some of these proposals or policies before they pass them. Because at times you realize they put a lot of money in them, and the impact is zero. It can't be felt on the ground. So there needs to be a thorough study of those policies, regulations before they are passed into, in that it has to embed the bottom-up approach that will now have an inclination to the people down. And then fully digitalizing, I am aware that there's a one-stop center the government has opened that interlinks different departments, but that is not enough. That does not reach down to the lowest person. I know of URSB as being one of the most digitalized government department now, that you can request for a service now and you get it now. That one I give it to the government. So if we can do a replica of that to Moyo local government, Arua local government, Bududa local government, you see the level of engagement, the level of transparency and accountability will shoot up.
Time is not in our favor, but we have discussed how productive these tools, if well invested in and well aligned with our service sector, their contribution. Timothy, just say bye to the viewers. I don't want to be exclusive, yet we say digital rights are inclusive. You have the last statement before I close.
Okay, thank you very much. I know for me, it is some kind of misleading to say that the government has actually not done anything. It has done something, but then we could have done better. So the government, for me, my appeal to it is that it should do their part and let people do their part in terms of engagement, and when they have gone wrong, they accept people to pigeonhole them accordingly. Like what I mean, the government.
You're making it longer. Yet you said we are very powerful online, but lies on the street. We thank you again, our viewers, for joining us on the Youth Roundtable. We're always privileged to have you, our dear panelists. We look forward to having you again. My name has been Ivan Masawi for the Youth Roundtable. We thank our production team, our Center for Constitutional Governance, and all of you, our viewers, that follow us every Wednesday afternoon. Thank you.